Today we have here with us Geeta Seshu. Geeta has been a former editor of the magazine Unionscape as well as a former correspondent of Indian Express. She is presently a consulting editor of the media website thehood.org. Today we will be talking with Geeta Seshu about issues regarding silent spaces in the media as well as how the media deals with it. So Geeta, my first question would be, what are the areas in our country and communities which you feel are silenced?
Well, we have a very vast country. We have conflict situations happening in our border areas, in Kashmir, Manipur, as well as within other parts of India. None of this is routinely covered in the media or represented in the manner it should be. That's one huge area of silence. There are other areas of silence. We are currently in our country going through a lot of displacement and projects which are affecting people very adversely. Economic policies that are creating a huge problem for people. The farmers' suicides, which we are very familiar with in Maharashtra, right, but also in other parts of India. So agricultural crises, mining problems, the entire economic policies that cause displacement. None of this is routinely discussed again in the media or discussed in a manner in which it gives us some idea of the depth or gravity of the problem. That's a huge area of silence. We are living in Mumbai, and in Mumbai there is this huge displacement again and problem of people who live in 50% of Mumbai's population live in slums, and there is a huge sense of fear about what is happening to their homes, as well as to the kind of development that builders are bringing in, aided by government policy again. But this is not discussed at all by our media. So there are huge areas of silence, and these are just some of them.
And do you feel that the voices that are already vocal, are these voices made more noisy by the media?
It depends on which voices you feel are vocal. There are many vocal voices. Many voices in all these areas that I talked about, the conflict areas, problems where displacement is taking place, or economic policies. They're extremely vocal, but they are not given the kind of voice they should be given. So there is that problem, definitely. They are vocal, they're very articulate. In Kudankulam, for instance, there's been this long pending agitation on nuclear power, on the nuclear power plant. Very close to home in Jaitapur, there is this huge agitation by farmers again, by residents of Jaitapur against the nuclear power plant. These are all very vocal people, but they are not given that kind of space. On the other hand, you have a lot of other voices which are speaking up in favor of displacement, in favor of economic policies that actually are harmful, in favor of cultural values which they think are what India's culture is all about, and India's
The
moral brigade traditions. They're all extremely vocal also, and they get a lot of space in the media. So there is definitely an imbalance in the kind of spaces that are being given vocal presence in the media.
Is the media really proactive in bringing out the silent voices?
No, actually it isn't. That's the whole problem. Media is supposed to provide some kind of a voice. The media is supposed to provide a platform for all manner of opinion, but it doesn't do that. That's exactly the point. It doesn't.
Has the nature of these silences changed? Do you think it has decreased or increased?
The nature of the silences? I think it's intensified, definitely. And we have, for instance, something called the free speech tracker, which tracks daily instances of violations of free speech across the country, across the board, across all media, in every area of human existence. And you know, if you look at some of the statistics we have, it's pretty alarming actually. The last year's report that we have, which we released recently, has something like about 5 journalists who were killed in India, and because they wrote about all manner of things, whether it was about crime, about a medical negligence case, about you know, a domestic violence case that went wrong, mining incident, mining corruption which ought to have been covered. So these journalists have been killed. We have about 38 instances of journalists who were attacked, and very brutally attacked. We have something like censorship in print media, electronic media, literature, art, education, theatre, in the internet medium. And these are huge figures. There were 14 instances in print media, 4 in electronic media. I mean, there were about 41 instances of censorship, you know, the silences that you're talking about in the online media, all in 1 year, all in 1 year. And surveillance is going up, privacy issues are coming up. So they're definitely...
Like the recent Asim Trivedi case.
The recent Asim Trivedi case was just one case of the kind of censorship of his cartoons. But we have several other instances. Professor in Kolkata was put into jail for his cartoons. We had the case of this Shaheen Dada and Renu Srinivasan, who were immediately, you know, charged, and they just didn't go. They just spent one night in jail, but they were charged with Section 66A again, which is used for internet related any kind of electronic communication, which is seen as grossly offensive. Now all of these are huge problems. Now to come back to your question about silences, definitely it's intensified, and like I said, our tracker shows you how it's intensified across the board. But there is some way in which I feel people are being able to challenge these silences when they use the internet far more intelligently and in a much more focused way. When for instance, the latest, you know, when the incident of that Delhi gang rape took place, when women's organizations came together and have been, you know, petitioning and demanding of the government that they change the rape laws. So it's still possible for us to push, you know, for people to be able to get together and push governments to change. But they need to be much more organized about it, and they need to be far more alert to what is happening everywhere.
Ma'am, what do you feel about you know, issues where a novel like Salman Rushdie's novel,
Yeah.
A Satanic Verses, how it was banned?
Yeah.
What do we do in such a situation? I mean, a country like India.
I would definitely feel that we ought to have, you know, freedom to be able to decide for ourselves whether something is good or bad. When it comes to seeing a film, or reading a book, or watching a play, or seeing an art show, we take a decision to go and look at the art show or the movie or the play. We don't have it come to us, we approach it. So we must have that freedom, definitely, to be able to decide for ourselves whether it is good or bad. I think the Vishwarupa case is a very good example of how government tried to create this kind of panic and say that this would cause a huge law and order problem because it was controversial. But the film has been released. The film was released elsewhere without any cuts, and it didn't cause any law and order problem. In fact, reviews say the film has really gone off the mark. So a film like this would have died a natural death. It wouldn't even have survived if it was so bad. But that's a decision that people take when they go and see it. But what happened before the film was released is that there was this huge sense of panic that a film like this would cause law and order problems. And there was no argument ever that that governments have a responsibility to maintain law and order. That is their responsibility. They cannot ban a film that has been given a certificate for viewership on grounds that it can cause a law and order problem. That's the job of the government. It has to maintain law and order.
Ma'am, do you feel that social networking has amplified these silences?
I think for a large majority of this country, the internet, and access to the internet doesn't exist. But for a growing number of people who are educated and who are literate and who are a little more conscious, by virtue of being a little more informed or better informed or have more access to information, most certainly social media has helped to get them to learn more about these silences, as you say. I think they're trying, definitely. They're trying both with traditional media as well as with alternative, non-traditional, with non-mainstream media, which is non-commercial. I think there is some attempt to do it.
Okay. And
we have a huge variety of blogs today. We have very active YouTube interventions by people who put out their videos on YouTube. So we have social media networks, Facebook, Twitter. So I think all of them have worked, definitely. And some kind of synergy amongst all these different media would really work.
Do you feel the mainstream media is doing anything really strong about this, to bring out these silences?
Not in the way it should be. Mainstream media tends to highlight the silence, the areas of silence, when there is some kind of violence or when there's some huge conflict, not otherwise. So the mainstream media still tends to follow the old paradigm of bad news, selling only if it made some kind of an impact in terms of some sort of a violent act or a riot or a bomb blast or any other such thing, but never actually look at processes, never actually look at problems, never actually look at the underpinnings of these areas of silence and why they are silenced.
Right. Do you feel the media has been unintentionally exploited by the voices which try to silence other voices?
I don't think it's unintentional ever. The mainstream media, the corporate media is definitely interested in the story that it thinks will sell, and the more sensational it is, it will definitely sell. It's designed in such a way, it's a 24/7 beast which has to generate news so that people watch it 24 hours in a day. And if it doesn't get that kind of audience, it doesn't get its advertisers. And so the media ends up doing this far more than it should be, and no breaks at all within its entire system of production and distribution of news. Because news is produced, news is distributed.
News is a product.
So when it happens, the media has no breaks, no way of checking this kind of thing. During the Kaveri riots in Bangalore some years ago, we had two editions of the same newspaper, one coming out from Bangalore and the other from Chennai, and both editions took diametrically opposite viewpoints. One was in favor of the Kaveri waters being shared with Tamil Nadu, which was obviously the Chennai newspaper.
Okay.
And the other was in favor of not having those waters being shared, which was the Bangalore edition of the same newspaper, the same media house, the same company, and they both made a lot of money because sales went up, and both of them were, demanding that completely opposite things.
It's completely market oriented.
And both justify it.
Commercially.
Both justify it by saying that they are representing their readers.
So this was Geeta Seshu, who spoke to us about silent spaces and just about what a lot goes on behind how the media chooses to show to its audiences. Thank you so much, Geeta ma'am, for speaking with us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.